The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey, look at me. I'm Sandra D. I'm actually Sandra D's pervy uncle. It's Tuesday night, March 18th, 2025. It's 9 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 6 p.m. on the West Coast, 8 a.m. in Singapore, I think, noon in Sydney, Australia, I think, and where I'm sitting in Northeast Minneapolis, it's 8 p.m. Central Daylight Time. I am Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. This is episode number 210, if you're keeping score at home. And I was going to check last night. Like I said, I'm not certain those times I'm announcing for Singapore and Sydney are right now because we're in daylight time here in the United States and no one else moves. So I don't really know for sure. I got to check that. Just another thing for me to do. All right. Our guest tonight is STEVE MERA. Steve is he's a paranormal researcher from the UK, UFOs, ghosts, poltergeists, unusual activity. He's done it all. He's been doing it for 40 years. You've seen on him every show on the channel, Travel Channel, History Channel, imaginable. He's everywhere. And he's our guest this evening. We taped this afternoon. We're not taking any calls tonight. This interview is well over an hour, and it's well worth your trouble. I mean, he tells us some stuff here. Matter of fact, at one point, he literally almost violated his security oath. He almost said something he wasn't supposed to say. I'm glad he didn't. But he has some real interesting thoughts here on the nature of all this stuff. And he's been, and the thing is, the interesting thing, and you'll find this out in the interview too. He's generally a skeptic. I know, and I consider myself one too. Even though, as I've said many times in the past, I even say in the latter part of that interview, 95% of all UFO reports are bogus, but the 5% that aren't, and there's so many of them, it's overwhelming. And that's kind of the way he looks at it too. Matter of fact, you'll notice in the interview, I asked him point blank, what percentage of hauntings went unexplainable in his 17-year career exclusively researching that, or actually doing it for other people. He actually did it for companies. Matter of fact, he even like de-ghosted a building for the Ministry of Defense, believe it or not. And he said precisely 28%. 28% of them are real. The other 72% are bogus. But anyway, yeah. And I say I'm a skeptic too, but none of my friends or my family believe me. They just think I'm in the tank for all this stuff. But no, the thing is, there's a lot of evidence, a lot. And we'll get to that maybe in another show too. So we're not taking any calls tonight because this interview is quite long. But tomorrow night we have open phones. It's an open phone night here. I haven't done that in over a month. So I'm encouraging you to call up tomorrow night. Sit by your little inner tube screen or whatever, or crawl in bed or something. I always imagine people are watching the show in bed. I don't know why. I just do. It's like 9 o'clock on the East Coast, and you're probably getting cozy. We used to do this at 11 o'clock Eastern. I'm actually thinking, for various reasons, of moving back to that time. I am. I don't know. We'll see. I'm not going to make a decision of that till May, but we might do that. We might move back to that time. So, and then you're definitely in bed, and maybe you call me up or whatever. I want to thank. Last night we had Don Zoro on. Great conversation, and our regular caller Think called in. Great conversation with him. Don is a friend of mine, and he's been a long time guest on these shows going back years. Think is a relatively recent caller, but I find he's interested in the same stuff I'm interested in. I like talking to him, so I want to thank both of them. Awfully kind of them. Now, so we got open phones tomorrow night. Thursday night, Lee Richardson is back. It's her second interview of 3 Thursday interviews in a row on her new book called Brain Crisis. She's a psychologist from Dallas. She's the founder of the Brain Performance Center and the Brain Performance Institute in Dallas. What's the difference? The center is for consumers and regular people. The institute is for companies. That's the difference. But she's the founder of both of them and runs both of them out of her office in Dallas, Texas. So she's joining us on Thursday. We've already actually taped that interview. We taped it last weekend. The previous one and the one on the following this coming Thursday, next Thursday, we're doing on the afternoon of the taping, but of the afternoon of the show. That's generally that's the modus operandi we have now here. Generally, we tape the interviews in the afternoon before they run. That's partly so that we know the technology works. We've had too many live interviews where the picture or the sound has gone to hell, and I don't want to deal with that anymore. It's unprofessional. I make an exception for like some of my friends who come on. They just barge in. What the hell? On Friday, we have a Friday show. This is the first time ever in the 19-month history of this program that we're doing 5 shows in a row. We're doing a Friday show, and it's Sina McCullough. She's a medical correspondent for the Epoch Times, and we're going to talk about the bird flu and how that affects you and how it affects the fact they killed, what was it, some god number of millions of chickens to eradicate the bird flu, and apparently it didn't work. And that's one of the reasons your eggs cost $7 a dozen. That's one of the reasons. But so that's our week here. Yeah, seriously, tune in tomorrow night. Call up. I want to talk to you. We'll have a lot of fun, because the normal things I talk about. I'm talking about UFOs. I'm talking about Trump, and it's like blah blah blah. It's like you don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear that. People want to hear from you. They want to hear what you ate that morning. They want to hear about your relationship. They want to hear about some sketchy, shady sex shit you're doing. They want to hear that stuff. Now we're not taking video phone calls at the present time. We used to take them, and I might reinstitute that. But you can talk about sex if you want, because Americans don't care about auditory porn. They don't. This has been my complaint. There's this famous trial. This is about 20 years ago now, about some rap guy. Because they are about the fact that his lyrics were defamatory against women. And I'm thinking, well, there is such a thing as auditory porn, but Americans don't buy it. The Europeans do, but we don't. If you can't see it, it's not porn in America. But you can talk about it. And you can tell Uncle Jim. You can tell him he's a pervert. Just here amusing myself. Okay, let's hear a word from Conk News, and then we're going to get right to our interview with STEVE MERA, paranormal researcher extraordinaire. Here we go. Hi, all. I want to talk to you about Conk News. You've probably heard me talk about this before, but if you're a news junkie, you should try this out. Conk News is a news aggregator. Now, there are plenty of news aggregators on the web, but Conk News is different than all the rest, and here's how. Most other news aggregators will lump the top stories from each news source under that news source. The top 10 stories, like, for example, from Fox News, Breitbart, the New York Post, etc. What Conk News does is it sends its servers out onto the web to over 75 different news sources every 3 hours. And yes, this is an automated process, but in this case, that's actually a good thing. And collects the latest stories from said 75 sources and then lays them out on its own front page in the order they were posted, regardless of the source. So you see the latest stories at the top of the front page, regardless of where they're from. And this is all free to you. You don't need to log in. You don't need to subscribe, register, nothing. It's completely free. All you have to do is go to conk.com to check it out. That's conk.com, 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 Conk News. Joining us from his office in Manchester, England, STEVE MERA, parapsychologist, researcher and investigator extraordinaire. How you doing, Steve?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for having me on. I'm doing well.
You're everywhere. Now, the reason I actually thought of booking you is because I saw you on the Unsolved Mysteries episode on Netflix with Don Phillips. But I mean, I've seen you all over the place because you are all over the place. And I think somebody described you as a workaholic, and you must be.
I am.
Yeah.
This subject absorbs you. It really does.
How'd you get into this crazy business anyway?
Well, I mean, I got into it really in two different ways. My father was into the subject when I was a young boy, and I was fascinated with reading his books. And he had a large book collection, and Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods and Inside the Flying Saucer. And I was fascinated with them from a young child. But I have had a number of experiences since I was a young child as well. So kind of two things really got me into this subject.
But it's a lot of work.
41 years in the subject now. I've traveled the world and continue to do so, and lecture and research programs, think tanks, writing books, tutoring courses, a lot of television work, which I've done over the years. But I like to keep myself busy. 360 degrees in this subject is I like to be as much as involved as I possibly can and try and advance the subject. It's no easy task, but we are taking slow steps ahead.
Well, the subject encounters a lot of different things. So let's get into that right away. First of all, how do you define paranormal yourself?
Well, do you know what? When I first started, I was fascinated in the subject paranormal, and it was very defined within a box. It consists of hauntings, poltergeist disturbances, and things like that. But as time's gone on, I realized that the name paranormal accounts for so much that it really is. It's just unbearable to try and fit everything in that box. So I don't have the boxes anymore, because what I find paranormal attributes across other subjects, be it the cryptid phenomena, be it the UAP phenomena. There are so many different things which has those attributes of paranormal in it. So I don't think we should have the boxes anymore. That compartmentalization's got to go, because you'll find paranormal guys, they don't deal with the UFO guys. And, we're not going to get a clear picture. And so we break down those barriers and look at it as a whole, as phenomenology. And when you do that, we realize very quickly that we started to gain some answers in regarding the comparisons and how we go about researching, because they're the same phenomena in both sides of these camps, but they're called two different things. I mean, telepathy, as in regarding alien abduction phenomena, is the same thing referred to as transplacement in paranormal circles or parapsychological tests, and it's exactly the same thing. So it's just terminologies change, it muddies the waters, it becomes problematic. So we decided to just get rid of all that compartmentalization, look at the subject as a whole, and start to really nitpick and look at what is actually going on. It's too big a picture to say that it's just paranormal or supernatural. We got to break it down. So we created subjects within the paranormal, within the supernatural and parapsychological research, known as paranormal mechanics. It's the little things that make a difference. It's how does it tick? How does it work? And what evidence and scientific data can we provide?
I read a really interesting book recently. I'm guessing you're familiar with this guy named Patrick Jackson, called Quantum Paranormal. Now,
yes,
he has a very, very interesting theory, and he comes from a world of IT. And his theory is that a lot, if maybe not most, and maybe possibly all of what people consider like poltergeist hauntings or paranormal phenomena is caused by this network of alien drones that's basically been unleashed across the planet, And the reason I bring that up is because his take on this, and I think you've alluded to this and other people have too, that there's a lot of commonality between what people consider quote unquote hauntings and the UFO or alien phenomena. Oh, yeah. And so can you reconcile that in your mind, or have you come to any conclusions at all? Or?
I was aware very early on that regarding Project Blue Book, and we're going back some time now, the Blue Book Yeah, I mean, the Project Blue Book officers will go out to, say, for an example, Mrs. Brown. She's reported seeing a UFO follow her home in a vehicle she was traveling in. It hovered over the farmhouse for about almost 30 minutes before it disappeared. And they go out to see Mrs. Brown. But when Mrs. Brown turns around and says, well, do you know, we were plagued by poltergeist type stuff after the incident. We've never had disturbances like this. The Blue Book officers would turn around and say, look, Mrs. Brown, we don't want any of that ghosty stuff. Just stick to the UFO facts, please. That compartmentalization was happening back then. It's still happening in current times. It has muddied the waters. It has caused us to be restricted and not look into other areas where we might find that research, might find some data. There's a correlation between both of these because there's UFO and the paranormal go hand in hand. If you research the phenomena, you can quite clearly define that these people are experiencers, not just of UFO phenomena, but closely associated with paranormal disturbances. They may have experienced those things, maybe even traumatic experiences, but they have had UFOs in their lives. So there's too many to ignore. And when we start to break the subject down, we realize that there's some aspects of paranormal physics which is relevant in the UAP phenomena. And the same physics are being seen in, say, for an example, materialization process. You know, when materialization process happens in poltergeist apports, when you analyze them, you'll find acute and unusual diathermic reactions in those items. And when UFOs suddenly manifest close to the ground and affect the plants, and you have a biological or chemical traumatology team come out to look at those plants and analyze them scientifically, they find very similar diathermic reactions in the plants. So it's as if like the sudden materialization of an apport or the materialization of a UFO might be utilizing the very same physics here.
It bothers me. I don't want to fault Patrick Jackson for doing this. People throw the term quantum around in the paranormal community now constantly because of quantum physics, but there is some justification of that. And you're talking about the plants on the ground, and I'm going to bounce all over here, Steve. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. I don't know how much work you've done in crop circles per se, but I've tried to explain to people that there's a difference, a very distinct difference between a quote unquote real and a quote unquote fake crop circle. And you're talking about plants here. Could you go into that a little bit? Because people laugh at me when I talk about this.
First looking at one, you will not get to realize what is real, what is authentic, what isn't, what is a fake. Because just simple mathematics and simple design and even trigonometry, you can create these wonderful crop circles and with wonderful designs to the point where you say it's impossible that somebody could have done that in 4 hours in the middle of the night. No, it isn't. I've seen it done. It has been tested, proven it can be done. Now, the problem is that how do we define what the phenomena is? Now, we can go back many, many years, long before people were making crop circles, to the point in time when, that was referred to as the mowing devil. Or there's even earlier references from the 1300s of regarding crop designs. But they were so strange and unusual, people thought that it was got to be the devil's work, of course. However, they have appeared all over the world in numerous countries, and some of them are in areas where there is no human footprint, really. You don't get hardly any people living there. So what's it if it's fake? Who's going to see it? What's the demonstration for?
Right.
And, when we looked into this, into the research and using specialized equipment, we realized in the more authentic, or should we say anomalistic circles, and we're not just circles now, they're all shapes and sizes,
right.
But there are anomalies found within the plants. Now, whatever those crops represent, sometimes it's corn, sometimes it's wheat, sometimes it's just small planted areas. Spinach as well I've seen it in all sorts of plants. So it doesn't matter where the crop stands. However, it's the anomalies that are found in the effects of the plant, such as flies which have been instantly fused to the plants for some unknown reason, which are all dead, of course. The explosion of the nodes, these are small pockets of water capsules that are caught and captured on the plants. They actually, they grow on the plants of corn and wheat. But when applying a certain amount of heat to them, what causes it is that the node explodes under the heat expansion, and those are visible, and it makes the crop buckle. It's not rigid anymore when you heat them up. They fall flat, but they fall in certain directions. So we do believe that there's some form of electromagnetic energy that's affecting the location, but it seems to be quite sporadic, and it's also spontaneous. However, we have not got the answers as to what is actually responsible. Only 2% of crop circles have been associated to UFOs. Only 2%. So is it really down to the UFOs, or are we dealing with something else? Is it a natural phenomena? We really don't know. But it has been going back for centuries, and we haven't got all the answers to that.
All right. What you said about the nodes of the plants exploding is what I thought was the core of the phenomena of the quote-unquote real crop circles. And from what I understand, the most likely culprit is microwave radiation. Is that the way you understand this too?
It is, yeah. I mean, it was a first thought that it was coming from above and coming down from the ionosphere, actually, because there was a lot more iron particles in that affected area than it was outside the affected area. So it was assumed that something was passing down the energy through our ionosphere and capturing that and pressing it into the ground, in a sense of speaking. Hence, there were more iron particles there. However, we've only got maybe about 6 cases like that worldwide, but they are unusual. What's responsible for them, we just don't know.
Are you familiar with that video that somebody took in Wiltshire? It was like maybe 20, 25 years ago. And
yeah.
Now, here's my thing on this. And this is not a loaded question. I really want to know what you think. Supposedly, it was in standard def bullshit video. And at that time, it was actually pretty hard to fake video. Well, it isn't anymore, which is, we'll get into that later too. But the guy, he rescinded that. He basically said that he faked it. And I don't know if I believe him. Do you have any insight on this at all?
Yes, I do. I mean, there's a lot more going on in that video with the lights creating the circle than meets the eye, because people tend to focus on just the 4 balls of light that are moving around and create the field. But in the background on the tree line is actually some other anomalies in there. That is what's caused a number of people to think it has some authenticity. However, I believe maybe about 70% of researchers will say, yes, I believe it was fake. It was a very good fake. But then, it does happen. I mean, if we just take that famous photograph of the Belgium triangular object in 1993 over Belgium, which was a clearly defined shape with 3 different lights, that turned out to be fake. The problem is that there are people out there very good at faking videos and can spend a considerable amount of time doing so. Nowadays, it's a lot more easy because we have better software, and even children can make something which is hard. You won't be able to tell the difference now. The evidence is not in videos and it's not in photos anymore. We're past that time, because now technology, anyone can make a fake, and it's next to impossible. Even with AI now, it's introduced. It's impossible. You can never know now. We can't take it as actual probable evidence that this is a significant thing. If someone sends us a video, somebody sends us a photograph, that's absolute evidence. We can't accept that anymore. We have to rely on, is there multiple witnesses, independent witnesses to this event? This is where we need to be looking for, because we cannot rely on what we're looking at now in videos and photographs.
I'm so glad you said this, because I'm in the process. We're working on a documentary over here addressing that very issue, that photography is now it's useless as evidence. Totally.
Absolutely.
But you touched on a thing there about that famous Belgium photograph. And so I want to know, and I'm not familiar with this, what's the political situation like in Britain? Because here, at this point, I basically don't believe anything the government tells us. I basically don't, because it appears, first of all, there's concrete evidence that people have been paid off to rescind or lie their testimony, and so their very famous thing about Travis Walton, one of the guys in the truck, was offered $50,000 to change the story. I mean, that's like one of many examples. So now when let me throw another example at you, and I'm curious to see what you think about this. Is his name Dave Santilli? I can't remember, the alien autopsy film. All right. Okay. I've been involved in video most of my life. I watch this and I'm thinking, that's so freaking fake. I couldn't buy a single. And then I stopped to think about it, and people started talking about it. I thought, well, there's a lot going on in that video, and it'd be kind of hard to fake. And he said he did it in his apartment. And I'm thinking, well, okay, so there's basically professional lighting. That video has been poured over with a fine-tooth comb. Everything in that video, every single item is pertinent to the era, the late 1940s. There were even stuff that people thought wasn't, and turned out was. Every single thing. And then I'm thinking, because the real takeaway is that the camera changes photos when it gets close to, or changes focus when it gets close to the body, right? I thought, oh God, they're just screwing around. And then I learned about the fact that the rotating lenses and cameras in the 1940s had to do that, and all sorts of stuff. And now I'm starting to wonder, well, if it is a fake, it costs somebody an enormous amount of money. And that's the thing. It's like, would somebody shell out $500,000 to make a 20-minute video on spec? I don't know. You tell me. What's going on here?
I think there are two things happening here, and this is the same conclusion that you probably reached, is that the fact that the guys that pulled it off and said how they pulled it off is not true. I don't believe that. I mean, it was done near a place near Smithfield Market in Manchester, an apartment. They used meat and things to build this thing from the market, to build this fake dummy. And it is, I do believe it's fake, but the amount of money and the amount of effort behind this fake is tremendous. Someone, somewhere, has created this exceptional fake and spent a huge amount of money on doing this for a certain reason. However, I don't believe the story it is. It's just these two guys just kind of put this thing together in their apartment. Absolutely no way. It is too fine a detail for them to have achieved it. There's a lot of work that's gone into this behind the scenes in regarding how to film it, using the equipment. There's just lots and lots of things. Even the best people in the world, which are directors and producers, have looked at this film and said, yeah, we could pull it off. We could do the same, but it's going to cost a lot of money.
Right.
So, and I agree with you that I think it's a secret wrapped in a secret, that someone somewhere has gone to great effort and spent a huge amount of money on this. And the cover story is that two guys just made it up in an apartment in main Manchester. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
But if they did, then what's the reason they did it? Did they do it for money? Because it's a lot of money to put out on spec. It is. I mean, in 1996, late 1990s, that cost them at least $500,000, at least.
I went through the whole process in 1996. I was part of the British UFO Research Association. I was working closely with Philip Mantle. And I remember when the first screening took place in the UK, I was there. They were frisking everybody coming in case they were hiding cameras or videos and things like that. Nobody was allowed to take any photographs or video of this. And it was basically put out that, this was thought to be authentic at the time, big question marks. Of course, as time's gone on, the story comes out that these two guys apparently did it. But anybody with an ounce of sense and knows a little bit about what the amount of effort and money behind this fake, you realize very quickly that the story doesn't add up about these two guys. There's got to have been like a very good production team who's gone to great lengths and expense to do this. Now, I do believe that video footage was eventually sold for millions.
Yes, right.
So there's a good reason for this, millions. The intervene is that maybe somehow these guys are involved, and Ray Santilli and his associates somehow. But even now to the point saying, yes, I mean, he came out very shady at first. He didn't say it was fake. He thought it was authentic, was his story. However, as time's gone on, he says, yes, I believe it's a fake and this, that. So his story has changed. But I can only assume that it must be down to the amount of money this particular video has been purchased for, just simply because of its notoriety, for one.
Right.
Because it's a unique video that turned the world upside down for a short period of time.
Do you buy Santilli's story that it was actually that based on a real film he got and he put in the and running through the machine ruined it? Do you buy
No,
it?
not at all. No, I don't. I do not know. I mean, the first thing is they did have color. They did have color back then.
Yeah.
So I would assume that if you're going to have someone right at the top level who's going to be responsible for filming some of the most prestigious and most important video documentation, you're going to use color film for a start. But a lot of things didn't add up to me. And a lot of it didn't really add up to the testimonies of the people who experienced things firsthand at Roswell. So there's a lot of holes in this. I don't think it was based on an earlier piece of footage. If it was, then he raced until he may have seen another fake. Who knows? There have been probably a number of attempts over the years at this.
Speaking of Roswell, I mean, so you basically covered the entirety of paranormal phenomena. I basically have stuck with basically UFOs. So my thing on Roswell is basically everything that I've read over the last 30 years. I think it probably happened, but I still think there's some doubt. The reason I think it probably happened is, like you referred earlier, there's an enormous amount of witnesses whose stories are more or less the same. They're credible people. They're not, trying to put any airs. Almost none of them have actually tried to make any money off of this. On the other hand, if you really get down to it, there's little things like the fact that people who said they actually saw the craft said it had wings. Well, what the hell's that about? You don't need wings to fly around in space. And so I do not buy the government story at all about the weather balloon thing, but I do wonder if it was some other sort of top secret military aircraft that's never been released.
It's very possible.
Then the question is, why would you not talk about it after 80 years? I'm sure it's obsolete now. So where are you on this whole thing? I mean, from across the pond.
The story's kind of split into, apart from the Roswell incident, in regard to the craft coming down, whatever this craft be. The other side of that coin is that those that claim that they witnessed small bodies. Now, if you take into consideration, this is 1947, nobody was talking about the small grey beings back then. He didn't really get going to the of course 61 from September with Betty and Barney Hill, but 70s, 80s, very much so through the 80s. Highest point was through the 80s. And 90s, as it filtered out around 96, 97 to lesser cases. They still happen, of course. But you think to yourself, well, why are they talking about small beings which might be in grey complexion like children? At that time, when you got all these other incidents that happened, this was not based on an earlier incidence of highly reported phenomena of small beings. It came out the blue that there was remarked.
It did.
And at least 6 or 7 people come forward at that time, all talking about that they'd seen these small bodies. Now, whatever craft that came down, it's been debated so much. Is it ours? Is it theirs? Or is it a bit of both in some cases? Now, I've looked into the Horton theory, that they were test flying Hortons, and this is what, which was seen only prior to the Roswell incident by Kenneth Arnold. And it escalated to the point where, of course, these crafts, were they two? Did they collide? Were they brought down by a storm? If it's UFOs or the true UAP, they have no problem flying through storms. In fact, NASA released a number of videos, there's quite a lot of them throughout the 1980s, the STS missions. And you can see from space that UFOs are attracted to electrical storms around planet Earth. So electrical storms not going to bring these things down. It's not a problem for them. So that theory kind of goes out the window for me. Somebody said, oh yeah, well, it was brought down by microwave energy weapons. Well, if these things can fly in space, we have something called as cosmic bombardment of microwaves in space, which is 100 times, 1,000 times more than what we could use on planet Earth in a weapon. So that doesn't seem to add up to me. if a craft did come down there, it is still a mystery, believe it or not. Even now, all these years later, it is still being debated. Is it ours or is it theirs? Now, the only thing that can define that is that, well, if these bodies are of non-human origin, then they're either created biologically somehow, and this is, you're talking the 1947 here, or they are extraterrestrial or interdimensional, call them what you will, non-human intelligence. If that is the case, then there was a lousy, terrible way they dealt with this coming out to the headlines. I mean, it's just, did you just catch them off guard, and the excitement and the horror of it all just let people slip and talk about it, and it got into the press and on the radio? Maybe. Accidents do happen. People love to talk, especially if it's something so significant. It can happen. It's happened in the past. However, it's still one of those subjects that's highly debated today. And in my personal opinion, I would say, well, it wasn't a flying saucer of any sort, to be honest with you. I think it was more delta wing shaped craft, right, which really looks prominently like some of the most modern kind of technology that we would see flying out of Lockheed Skunk Works, to be honest with you.
Right. That's exactly what I was referring to. So that's what I'm thinking too. So in terms of true UAP phenomena, it's not the best example anybody could come up with, but it's what everybody talks about. I want to go on to the Netflix show that I watched when you and Don Phillips. So tell me about this guy, and he's got his sidekick named Becky. And I got the first of all, and I have to address this too. For all the work you've done for all over the years, you do seem, and you said this on the show, that you're more or less a skeptic. You don't believe stuff right offhand, do you?
Not at all. No, I don't waste my time going around ghost hunting, ghost busting. It's just not my thing. I am introduced and work within the subject of the paranormal. I worked for 16 years, well, actually it's almost 17 years, for corporate companies regarding disturbances, which was a managerial problem for them. So I got to
stop you on this. I got to stop you there. So what are companies actually hiring you to figure out if their headquarters are haunted, or what is that about?
Well, my first corporate investigation was for the Ministry of Defence. It was one of their buildings, very large. They were having disturbances there to the point where staff wouldn't work late, or certain parts of the building became an issue for management. It went all the way up the chain to the top. They didn't know how to deal with it. They don't have a protocol to deal with it. They didn't know how to manage the staff. So I was called in to not only deal with the whole situation of what is going on here, but also to try and manage the situation, because we're kind of acting as they're our clients, so their interest is, we want their interest at heart. Make sure that it's contained. Make sure that the staff are dealt with appropriately. That if they require counselling, then fine. If they need to talk about something, but it has to remain confidential for the sake of the company, for the sake of the businesses, that sort of thing. And at the end of the day, we do a thorough investigation on a corporate level. It is confidential. There's a CAP document, which is confidentiality assurance policy document. They call it the CAP document. It's signed for 10 years. We go back to them 10 years later. If they want to renew, they can do. If they don't want to renew, then we are allowed to go public with that. So the Ministry of Defence was one of the first ones, but I was linked into the UK's Public Relations Office. And once my name got on the system, I started to receive phone calls from all sorts of different businesses, from all over the country, Scotland, Ireland, all places, the United Kingdom. And they were businesses. Sometimes there were stores like supermarkets and things like that, supermarket chains, lots of different things. And it was surprising that how many businesses did have problems regarding certain disturbances, which they couldn't rationalize in any shape or form. And we went in, and we had to also write protocols for them, because the management didn't have a clue how to deal with this. Mm-hmm. And the protocol was to protect the company, in regards to the problems that staff might be experiencing things. They don't want bad press. I did a lot of work for city councils, private landlords that maybe have 6,000 houses that they rent out, and we had to write protocols for all these establishments across the UK and regarding how to deal with it management-wise, how to deal with it, because they're businesses at the end of the day and they want to rent their homes. But what happens when, you've got tenants now saying, I'm not going to pay my rents because it's not livable conditions when I have to live with these disturbances. So they stop paying the rent because the tenants have more rights than the landlords these days. And it's in their favour. And that's a bad situation. They want to be able to resolve this situation as quickly as possible. They don't want it to get out into the press. They don't want bad press. And the news teams are always looking for colourful stories like this. Family is scared away from family home and things like that.
Right.
It's bad for the business. The press is not good for them. And at the end of the day, they still want to be able to rent their home. So we went in with protocols and how to manage this in an appropriate manner, under confidentiality, non-disclosures and things like that. And that went widespread across the country. So I did about 17 years. We still do them. We don't have as many now we used to, but we went through a spate, 17 years. And we also worked with police authorities and criminal investigation departments as well.
Can you sum up of those 17 years and all of these investigations, like what percentage of them you came away that this is truly unexplained phenomena? Because I'm sure you explained a lot of it, but can you give me some of the percentage on this?
Yeah, 28%.
Okay, all righty. I was going to say 30, so I'm pretty close. Okay, that's good.
28%. Sometimes it was just watched too many scary films, read too many paranormal books. They're living in a house. They might have just moved in. They're not used to the sounds of the home. There's creaking floorboards. There's house expansion sounds. It's the boiler kicking in at 3 o'clock in the morning, expanding the pipes. It's all sorts of different things. And then the mind takes over. And when it does, you start to believe there's strange things going on. You will convince yourself. That can happen. It happened many times. There was also been times when it's been purposeful, that the tenants, in fact, had lied and said these things are happening when it wasn't, because they wanted to be rehoused into a different location because they didn't like the neighbor next door.
Right.
Simple as that. So we were dealing with hoaxes. We were dealing with people with misidentifications. However, there were some which were truly very profound disturbances, and we had to rehouse. We had to sit down with the corporate companies and have them rehoused to new homes because of the disturbances which do take place. So it doesn't happen very often. And it worked out roughly about all the investigations we did in the corporate side, about 28% were we thought to be authentic.
So you sit down with the people who own these houses and say, yep, they're ghosts.
Well, yeah, we just have to say, well, here's the evidence. We provide it in document form. We scrutinize everything, and we know, because we've worked in this subject for so long now, there's a mechanism, there's a protocol, there's a way certain phenomena works and deals and does things. We know when something doesn't add up, it doesn't fit the bill. When they're telling us something, so that's a bit unusual. We had a family that literally almost burnt their house down from the kitchen. They set it fire to itself, blaming it on the paranormal. So it were some extreme cases, but then there were also ones which were truly fascinating, things I'd witnessed which I'd never witnessed before for the first time, which was quite profound, and some of those cases were incredible, and fascinating.
You're a researcher, and I've had Stan Gordon, the American researcher, on this show, and Stan's a great guy, but he absolutely refuses to speculate. But I'm going to ask you to speculate. So, what are these ghosts? What are they?
Well, there are different things that go on in the field of the paranormal. Most of the time, it's disturbances which you would not put down to either haunting or poltergeist. Sometimes it gets a bit mixed up as to what is. Well, how do you define the difference between an intelligent haunting, which can move objects around, to poltergeist disturbances that move things around? This is a problem. People create too many boxes and too many names. You just got to basically say it how it is sometimes. But most of the true phenomena is, yes.
Don't you think people do that just to simplify? I mean, people have a hard time wrapping their minds around this phenomena. They do it kind of just to simplify it for themselves, don't they?
I do, yeah, and I understand if you're not into the subject, simplifying it in methodologies or putting them into boxes is a good thing. For the researchers, though, it's a terrible thing because we shouldn't have been confined into these boxes. We were led to believe that poltergeist phenomena is only associated with adolescents, with children. It's this spent up energies associated. Not true at all. Poltergeist phenomena can manifest in homes where there are no people there. So that is not true. There is incorrect information out there. The more you research, you realize, and the statistics, a lot of them are wrong. And some of these things, I can only say, are intelligent entities of some sort which interact. Now, when trying to find out exactly what that phenomena represents, does the phenomena mimic the spiritual aspect of somebody who died in the building? Is it truly that person who died in the building, or is it something else? Because we realize through experimental research that we've been involved with communications with things which are referred to as non-human intelligence. When we conducted those investigations and were reached communication levels, in other words, you can ask questions and you'll gain a response.
Right.
That through DVP, direct voice phenomena, which is always above us, by the way. It's never, if you stand up, it's above you. If you sit down, it's above you. It's always above you, the sound comes from. And when we got to the point where we could ask questions, we were very serious about what questions to ask. So we wrote some of these questions down. And when it came to asking the questions, all of a sudden, all responses came out prior to us even asking the questions. So they can read us. They know what we're thinking. They know what the experimenter's doing and thinking. So they can take the information from us and deliver it back to us. Exactly. And we're thinking, well, they've only just given us what we expect, what we knew to begin with. So we know they can do that. If that's problematic for us, because when we were thinking that, it might be a late uncle has passed away. But if you know all the information about your late uncle in your head, and they can take that information and give it you back, you're going to be convinced that you're dealing with your great uncle who's passed away.
Right.
That's a big, big problem in parapsychological research. The parapsychology departments will accept the fact and hold their hands up and say, yes, there is communication with intelligences. Is it proof of afterlife? They will put their hand down and say, well, there could be a lot of deception that's involved. They could be just being told what we want to hear. It's very, very problematic, as you can imagine. We are moving forward in the experiments, but it's very difficult. And trying to put your finger on, is it a ghost? Is it a spirit? Well, that's dependable. I mean, people claim to see these things, and I agree that they have been seen because I've seen some strange things myself. Yes, visually they are seen. Is it a representation of an incident from the past? Some of them, they're like a recording and they'll play back. Hence, they'll walk through a wall where there once was a door 60 years ago. And some of them are not. Some of them are intelligent or interactive in some ways. They interact with the environment, they interact with you, so it's part and parcel of that time event. And if that is the case, then we are dealing with something slightly different. Something has intelligence behind these to be able to visually produce something that you will see, or in most cases, because visualization is a very difficult thing apparently for the phenomena to manifest, it's a lot easier for them to manipulate items in the environment, move things around, things that get moved, things that get disappeared, things that turn up that don't belong. Those things seem to be a lot easier before the manifestation process, because apparently it requires a lot of energy to produce something that you can visually see as an apparition, for an example.
Right. So, the general standard for people like me who research, read 5 books and nothing else, the idea is kind of that there's 2 different types of spiritual beings. There's the recording that gets played over and over again that people see that you can't really interact with, and then there's the being that you can actually interact with. I mean, are there more? Is that just too basic? Is that true? What's your experience on that?
Well, of course, yeah, hauntings are divided into residual. And residual is playback events. Could be a war, an old war, battlefield, Gettysburg and
Uh-huh.
things like that. I've been there. So, yeah, those are recordings are well known all over the world. But are we dealing with a natural earthly phenomena here? That certain heightened thing, and it's always heightened. It's heightened emotion. It's not just always negative and on loss of life.
Right.
Sometimes it could be people partying in an old inn, and which you'll hear the laughter and coming from a room. It's heightened emotion, though, either being negative or positive, that gets imprinted into that location, be it wars or even happy things, like I say, in inns and things. So heightened emotion does seemingly get caught. Is it an earthly phenomena? A natural earthly phenomenon we're misidentifying as a haunting? Because I think a haunting really is something which interacts with the individual. Is seemingly different. When we are dealing with that, that is something different. So you've got these two things going on, but then we have variations of that, because then we have to kind of fit in. Where's the poltergeist? Where's the demological stuff fitting? Because there are two different things that fit in here. Poltergeist phenomena, when it manifests, can reach to a point, very rare, but can reach a point of oppression and the demological section of these three stages of demonology. It's extremely, extremely rare. Most of the data that's been provided, which a lot of films and things are based on, is very, very poor or untrue, when you start to research it. But there is a minuscule amount, which has an overwhelming amount of information. Unfortunately, a lot of the public domain don't get to hear that because it's usually buried away within the Vatican archives and things like that. But there does seem to be, they do manifest. And I think in 41 years, I've come across them 3 times, and when you say demonological stuff, it's a completely different feeling. And, you're dealing with something completely different. However, you've got the variations, but you are right. There does seem to be basically the two terminologies in the haunting field: the residual, which is the kind of the recorded events that people will see played back over periods of time. And of course, the interactive phenomena interacts with people.
I've heard that there's some farmhouse somewhere in Britain where hundreds of people, if you go down to the basement, you can actually experience an entire Roman army actually march right through you. Do you know what I'm talking about? Well,
it's in York. It's in York, yes.
And supposedly the reason it happens in the basement is because the basement used to be the first floor.
There was an old Roman road which ran through the basement. However, the Roman soldiers which are seen, you only see them from knee high upwards, and that's because the road is just 2 feet underneath the level of the building. So it's a procession. It goes, and they're unaware. They're not looking at you. They're not interacting. They're just going about their business. And it was the first time when this was documented some years back, when it was first very well reported. There were drawings made of accuracy of what they were wearing. And they had to give it to very specialized historians, some of the best historians in the world, to say, is it right? And they said it's absolutely accurate, but they wouldn't have known that. Because if you go look at the books and all the things you see on television about Roman armies, they get things wrong.
Yeah.
And they've never been accurate. But the historians, the specialists said, this is so accurate, they must have seen it. And people have gone on to see this a number of times.
I've been literally, from what I understand, like hundreds of people have seen this. Is that true? Like if you go down there and you're likely to see it.
I believe there's several dozen that have over periods of time in York, but York itself is full of history and has a lot of reported phenomena that takes place.
Well, isn't that true of your entire island? I mean, it's like people have been living there for like 2,000, 3,000 years. I mean, here in America, something's old if it's 150 years old.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've done fair enough investigations in the US, and it's different from state to state. But in the UK, I'd say I'm lucky enough to live probably on the most haunted island in the world. We don't have to go far to see a grey lady or a white lady. They're all over the place, and it's become a normality. I mean, we don't, surprisingly, not much actually gets into the press really regarding ghosts, because it's just so common.
Right. That's what we're going to ask you. It's not a big deal, is it?
It's not a big real, no.
Speaking of you coming to America, I started reading your book. I haven't finished it yet, The House of Fires and Whispers, and that takes place in Seattle. And that's, well, first of all, I got way off track here. Explain you meeting Don Phillips. Explain how all this happened.
I met Don Phillips quite a number of years ago now, and we've been working together for 10 years. Now, when Don first contacted me, like many do, and say, Steve, I've got these abilities, and will you come out on a ghost hunt with me? And my answer is normally going to be no.
Yeah.
I used to say, look, it's not, you do not want me. You want a ghost hunter guy, you want a ghostbuster guy, you go to them, go to the organization or groups. There are plenty of them. There's hundreds of them in the UK. Don't ring me, because
I have to really quick. How many percentages of the people that contact you are just batshit crazy? What's the percentage?
You'd be surprised. I'd be rude to say, but you'd be surprised. And you know what? I understand and I get it, because everybody's perception is different and beliefs are different. But at the end of the day, I cannot spend my time. I want to advance the subject. I cannot keep running around in circles looking for a great lady.
Yeah.
I expressed it on that. Look, I'm not your guy. You need a ghost hunter, ghost team, whatever. Thank you for ringing me, but no thanks. But Don was quite persistent, and he got to the point where, after a third or fourth phone call to me and me turning him down, I said, look, Don, I said, I'm the last person you want, because if I come out and I find anything which I think is hokey, I will put it out to the world. I will let people know, and you don't want that discreditation. I tell you, do not know, because I'm widespreadly known, and that'll be the end of you. And it was his reply that was very interesting to me, because he said, do you know what? You're the exact person I need. And I thought, oh, okay. Don't get told that very often. They usually run for the hills, but
right.
So I said, okay, all right, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. I will come out. And I visited a location in Leicester with him to go through some tests. And I was with another fellow researcher, and I said, don't get comfortable. We're only going to be there probably an hour tops, because he's not going to last long with me.
Uh-huh.
And I got in there, and the first thing he did is he had a recorder in his hand. And it's the same as this recorder, which is a DM670, exactly the same model, Olympus. And he picked it up and he said, right, I'm going to just record this for 10 seconds. And he said, guys, can you say hello to Steve? And he pressed record. 10 seconds, I'm listening, absolutely dead silent. He presses stop. And then he just presses the play button in the middle. And I hear a female voice say, hello, Steve. And I thought, okay, give me that device. And I said, right, okay, let me get my device out. Yeah, because I'm not trusting this device. And I said, try it again using my device. And he said, right, okay, so can you try this again? So he did it again. But whilst it was recording, I threw in there a random word like carrot, purposeful. Because what's the chance of that turning up on there if it's not a record? It's, he plays it back. Hello, Steve, carrot. You can hear me say in the background. And I'm not hearing hello, Steve in the environment. It's being recorded. And that got me a bit puzzled, being a parapsychologist. I'm looking around, I'm seeing, is there wires, is there speakers? I went through vigorous tests. Now, that 1 hour trip, which I thought was going to be just less than an hour, turned into something like 12 or 13 hours there, because he just continued to demonstrate and demonstrate and demonstrate. And I was totally surprised. He'd gone past the point. He'd raised the bar just that evening beyond what I'm used to. Yes, I do get things like that happen, but not that consistency every single time. I went through a blind envelope test with him. Now, blind envelope test is probably one of the hardest things to pass in parapsychological tests. It's an image that I don't know what's in there. It might not even be an image in it, but there's 3 envelopes, A, B, and C. There may or may not be an image in there. We don't know. Or whatever image it is. I don't know. Nobody, experimenters don't know. He doesn't know. He's given them, and I say, pick one of the envelopes, A, B, or C, and then tell me what's in that envelope that you pick. Well, he sat there and he said, okay. And he got his recorder out and he said, Becky. Now, this is I started hearing the name.
Yeah.
Becky, can you tell me what's in this envelope? I'm going to pick envelope B. What's in this envelope, Becky? And he pressed record. I heard nothing. And for only 10 seconds, pressed play. And I heard a female voice say something. Wasn't too sure what it was saying. I think it sounded like night or fight or kite or something like that. And he listened to it and he said, Becky, did you just say kite? If it is, say correct. He pressed record for 10 seconds. A female voice come back and said, correct. Don looked at me and said, it's a kite. I opened up that envelope B to see an image in there, which I unfolded and opened to reveal the picture of a kite. Now, the chance factor at that alone, statistically, is billions to one. Could be in any image. In fact, there might not have even been an image in them.
Right.
And I realized then that I was sat with a catalyst. Don Phillips is a catalyst. They're very rare. But he's in contact with something which is assisting him in regarding doing this.
So you've known him for quite a while now. Do you have any idea who Becky is? Do you have any theories or figured out?
Becky is not your average spirit. Though that it's still cryptic, considerable parts of this, which I haven't been told through Don. But it took me, I had to work with Don for 5 years before Becky would even communicate with me. And I've had the opportunity to do hundreds of experiments regarding Becky. One of them was an experiment that took place at 36,000 feet on an aircraft whilst we were traveling to see if the environment and the atmospherics makes a difference in regarding communication. And she spoke straight out of the air right in front of my seat, which we all heard, which proved the fact that, yes, atmospherics and environmentals do come into it. Certainly do. I've realized over a period of time that initially I thought, are we just dealing with some type of spirit, some type of guardian angel, whatever you want to call these things? No, it's much more than that. Becky is much more than just that. Now, I don't want to I've put my hand on this and say, this is the name. It's an angelic being, or it's this, or it's whatever. Because they are references. The terminology that's really come from us. But what I am told is that Becky is age old and is an intelligence that resides with Don. And Don, don't get me wrong, Don is exceptionally gifted in clairgosight, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, you name it. He has incredible, he's done remote view, and he's got incredible psychic abilities. And I believe maybe Becky was attracted to Don's capabilities from maybe, but there's definitely a collaboration between the pair of them, and it still continues to do so. So because we have replicatability, which science never really gets often, bench testing it, you've got to have it right. 6 o'clock, we want it to happen. It doesn't normally work like that. In the case of Don, it does, because it can draw upon Becky to assist. And that's allowed us and our scientific team at the Scientific Establishment for Psychology, SCP, to be able to conduct a lengthy amounts of experiments. And still, we are still in the area of not knowing precisely what Becky is, but identifying the fact that she's not what you might refer to as just the average spirit. She's something more. But is there a name for that? Or what are they? Who knows?
Steve, have you ever asked her what she is?
She wouldn't reply. She wouldn't. There are certain things we're not supposed to be told. Quite cryptic. But I can certainly tell you what it isn't, and that is like, your average kind of just communication from spirit. Which spirits do contact Don. They regularly do. When I'm filming with Don, my video footage is invaded by. It's impossible trying to film anything with Don because it's so difficult because it's invaded so much by phantom voices. And they're not. We don't hear anything at the time, but it's all over video recordings. I can't do a clean recording with Don without them sometimes. So it's problematic, but it's also fascinating, as you can well imagine.
People throw this term around a lot about interdimensionality, but the thing is, do you think there's something to that here, especially in this particular case, that we might be talking about somebody who's standing behind a dimensional wall or something like that? And that's what, is that because, I based on what your description and what I've seen, Becky, does seem to be more than a regular spirit. And then you wonder, are we, this has been proposed that we live in a world where we're living right next to other beings, but we can't see them or communicate with them each other. Is that something?
I totally agree. Yeah, you see, the problem is, and I know this is fact because I'm in a number of think tanks and I've been told certain things which isn't ready for the availability for the public, but little things I've said over the years.
I got to stop you again. Are you under any security restrictions regarding what you can talk about from any government?
I am under some restrictions in regarding sharing certain information from the think tanks, yes.
Okay.
However, there's some parts that I can talk. And governmental people have reached out to me from the US, the Advanced Working Party. I can't mention names, which have asked about the work that we're involved in the think tanks. There are some bits of information that we know exist. That the fact is that there is the phenomena which is widespread. There is seemingly a source for the phenomena which can identify as many, many different things, which we might interpret in different categories, be it the paranormal or cryptids or UFOs or aliens or whatever you want to call these things. But there's a source behind it. Whatever that source is, we don't know, but there's a source. And there are, in a sense, interdimensional, because there's no linear travel from these other planets. That's just not happening. There's no evidence for that. And that's why NASA are finding it. And that's why, the UFO task force and Arrow are coming out and saying, look, we can't find the evidence that these things are extraterrestrial. The hypothesis was there, ETH, for many years, but now you'll notice there was an application coming forward. We know that this was going to happen before the general public knew that the narratives were going to be forcefully changed. We were going to come away from extraterrestrials to interdimensionals. We're going to come away from the extraterrestrial hypothesis to interdimensional hypothesis. We had to do that. We've got to do that. We've got to change the narrative because the 78-year-old narrative is not working anymore. And the evidence now with technology, we can look into space and see and do statistics and say, okay, well, there's over, 13,000 reports over a week in a given area around the world. Where are all they coming from? There's no superhighway going backwards and forwards to Earth. There's little bits and bobs. But anything passing through ionospheres leaves weights, so we'd know. And they're easily detectable with the stuff that we have. So we don't got a mass amount of superhighway traffic. So where are they all coming from? So the interdimensional hypothesis has to come in here, you see, and the narrative had to change at Pentagon level. We knew it was going to happen before it did. This phenomenon is right under our noses, and it can interact with us at any given time, and we don't control it and never will do, and we can't govern it. It knows us inside out, reads our minds, and can act intelligently and use our own physicalities and psychological aspects against us, like, for instance, sleep deprivation. Well, the deprivation of sleep paralysis, should we say, it happens every night under REM, rapid eye movement, where input blockade and output blockade stops us from moving, stops us from listening for those tiny pieces of REM that we have to gain dream. We only need 20 minutes, but we spend usually 8 hours a night trying to get it.
That's right.
Yeah, it's true. And
Amen, Steve.
That's absolutely right. But the thing is, it's in our minds, it's in our brains, that input-output blockade. So all they're doing is coming along and manipulating the signals within our brains to cause that effect. It's nothing that they're doing. It's just manipulation, deception and manipulation of us. The phenomenon is around our nose, and they said, look, we know we can't scare scientific way. For the very first time over the last 5 years, we've had a tremendous amount of scientists come forward and ask to be involved in the UAP subject. They want to contribute. That's never happened ever before in history. We can't drop this onto their laps because we can't scare them away. We've got to drip feed them into this a little bit. It's problematic. It's too much for them because they've got to understand that the physics that we think we know is nothing. It needs to be emptied out and filled up with a new physics. And it's hard to tell a physicist this, as you can imagine. Times have got to change. It's got to be a slow process. And we've got to educate the scientists as well, in a sense of speaking, for them to continue their work. So we're not going to just bomb them and drop this on their laps because it's too much. Trying to understand the aspects and complexities behind this phenomenon is enormous. But then it's age old. It's always been here, manipulating mankind in its favor, sometimes even changing historical events. The fact is that this phenomenon appears to be many different things. If we really wanted to go with the old hypothesis that these things are just coming from a planet and they're traveling the vastnesses of space in a nuts and bolts craft using exotic engines, which is what I was told in the 80s, early 80s, that no, these things are apparitional sometimes. UAP can travel into the ground, into volcanoes, into physical. So they can. This phenomenon is metaphysical, but the problem is when people are filming them or pilots are seeing them, just because you see them doesn't mean that the physical, they can switch. This is why UFOs are seen going into the ground and into volcanoes. This is why they can enter the water or into the sea without leaving any wakes, why they can pass through aircraft or can pass by aircraft without leaving any wakes. This is a problematic, is that it's metaphysical. It's no different than paranormal phenomena. A ghost can walk through a wall, but then it can come up and pinch you.
Right.
Is it physical or not? It's the alien abduction phenomenon. He's come through the wall, they came through the ceiling. And yet they managed to pick her up and lift her. Are they physical or not? We're dealing with a metaphysical phenomena. There's been experiments demonstrated by NHI during these communication experiments showing their capabilities of metaphysicality. We know this now. That is all the same source, but delivering in different ways, which we thought were all separate. But what the crunch of the matter is, no, there's a huge amount of connectivity between them all. But like I say, you can't tell people that, the phenomenon is right under our noses, can interact any time it wants. And what can we do about it? It governs everything. It's got the sense and the power and the capabilities which are godly, which people would assume in ancient times is God. Deities, which are still worshipped today all over the world, various different times. And if you look through statistic surveys like we've done, you'll list over 7,000 different varied, if you want to call them aliens, small, large, big, tall, hairy, fat, thin, with wings, with eyes, with 4 eyes, with 2 arms, 3 arms, whatever. The variation is incredible, what people say. Do they all exist? Are they all coming from thousands of different planets, traveling to Earth, in similar type ships, doing similar things? It doesn't make sense. What does make sense is that this phenomena is a master of causing perception alteration in human beings. And this is what's affecting people who are having traumatic or near close encounter experiences with the phenomena. It affects the mind, it affects the brain. There are 2 places in the brain that are being affected by this through these type of experiences because of forced perception alteration by the phenomena. Some of them are giveaways, an advanced craft lands, they see it, but it's got portholes and rivets around the portholes. It's not going to be that on an advanced craft. It don't make sense because you're not seeing what it truly represents. And this is the masters of this. So it's very, very difficult, as you can well imagine, to try and understand the complexities of it, especially when you're dealing with physicists, astrophysicists, people that worked in their given field and think that they know, when in fact they know very little because they don't understand the aspects of physics that we need to learn as opposed to what we know. And that's living in boxes. We've got to expand our minds. Consciousness is a big part of this. Expanded consciousness experiments have been going on for some time. You may have heard references to psionics. I'm very aware of psionic circles, been going on for a while. It's not a new name.
Yeah.
You know, it's just got a lot of headliners at the moment. You know, right from the earlier days, which was the first stages was around seance and witchcraft and ritualistic practices, so engaged contact phenomena. Then it moved into the C5, and then it moved into the HICE, human, contact with extraterrestrials. And then it's obviously the PC, which is the psionic circles, have been going on for a while. I've been part and privy to these things. You know, we know how it works. And there are methods that will work better. There are forced methods that you shouldn't really do. You gain a quick response, but it's not a good. They don't like it, and these are all the ritualistic practices. And this is why witchcraft and occultism got involved in the contact cases at the early days, because it's quick and you do gain contact, but it's not a good way. They don't like it. It's forceful, it's intrusive. And the best method is to build it up over a period of time through experimental research. So yes, you are right. It's right under our noses, this phenomenon, and people just don't realize it.
My friend Jazz Shaw, the UFO writer, passed away in October suddenly. It was a very, very big loss. But he pointed out a couple of things. And first of all, he pointed out that David Grush, who appeared before the congressional panel about 18 months ago, Jazz pointed out, and Jazz knew David, and he said that David never used the term extraterrestrial. He always used the term non-human intelligence.
Yes.
Because, like you said, there's a lot of people that think it actually isn't extraterrestrial. But then the other side of that, too, is Jazz said he was talking to people in the Pentagon, and people here in the military who know about this, they don't want to use the interdimensional or bring up the interdimensional hypothesis because they think the public can't wrap their mind around it. And,
right.
Yeah. And of course, it's a really, really difficult concept. And you're talking about a condition or a being or that, basically like overlords over us. The problem with interdimensionality, and I don't have to bring this up to you, you don't have to know much about physics to know that if that's the case, humans will never be able to experience this. We cannot experience more than 4 dimensions. We can't. It's physically impossible for us.
Yes, we live in a box. Unfortunately, anything outside that box can look in, and that's the method. Right. However, we've got to understand that the only way to do that is to try and get out, not in a physical sense, is to have expanded consciousness. Expanded consciousness can take you out of the box. And that's the only way it's going to work with contact, really, to be honest with you. It's got to be expanded consciousness that's involved because this is their domain, and that's the method because, we are stuck in this rut of of reality, which is we create our own reality through the concepts of consciousness. So in the sense of speaking, we create the box we live in. And it's very hard to try and deal with the things that live outside that box if we are stuck in the box. So the problem is trying to work out what is the best method of communication that allows us to get out of the box. And that's consciousness. That's expanded consciousness. It's been done for a long time. Many, many thousands of years. Our ancient ancestors had their own way of communication and they knew about it. And they left clues behind. Ritualistic practices, you could say, okay, it's got occultism to it, or yes, okay, it's got witchcraft associated. Yes, okay. But the main thing is that they're all practices and they're all doing the same thing. The first non-human intelligence visualities took place around the science table, not an alien abduction case. And that's going back a long time. And interaction, yes, they want us to expand our knowledge and technology. Yes, they help by gifting and sacrificing for us to gain that technology. Yes, they helped us to the stars. Yes, there are secretive establishment. No, I can't tell you that.
Okay.
Yeah, what I can say is that there are still practices today that utilize the ritualistic practice of communicating and thanking for successful space operations. So
Okay.
they know in the highest circles that we've been helped along, and they do want to. The problem is that we're not, we're traveling so quick in technology that the mind and spirituality is not catching up.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right about that.
That's the
That's
problem.
exactly, you're right. That is exactly the problem. Precisely. We're great at physics, but man, when it comes to actual spiritual stuff, we're just kind of like little babies. So
We have, unfortunately, we've come away. In fact, the ancestors were better than us.
they were.
We lost our path, and we're not in touch with the earth now and the things around us as we used to be. So we're children with blinkers on, but we still have to learn. And we're thinking that we can learn through technology, but no technology will do it. We have to learn about how to do with it inward. Expanding the consciousness, for an example. Now, there are some good experiments and there's some good research that's taking place out there. And we are starting to learn about expanded consciousness, even from children right through to adult. People say, "Oh, I can communicate and bring these objects into view." Yes, many people can who have had early contact. These people have had early contact, I say initiation experiences, because we are aware when we're dealing with NHI and communicating NHI experiments that they're aware of future events. We've got 6, just so you know, our experimenters have got 6 logged details down of events taking place in the future, which came to pass exactly when they said and how he said. And it doesn't seem to matter if we come out of our house and turn left instead of turning right. It seems that we always reach that point where they are right. So we can say, okay, well, if they can, we know that it was the longest we've got recorded is 19 months. It could be a lot longer. How long can they do that for? The whole life? We don't know. But if they can, that means initiated experiences. You have an experience at 7 years of age. You interact with phenomena. It puts you on a roadmap. That changes your life so much that you become intrigued and obsessed with this subject that you spend your life in it. And eventually one day you're speaking to an audience of 5,000 people and you're carrying their word. And that's what they want. So maybe initiated experiences with 7-year-olds in bedrooms and stuff like that is because they know where you're going to be in 25 years' time.
Yeah.
And you're going to be doing what they want you to do. So maybe that's the reasons why. Now, I know a lot of researchers and investigators all over the world, the experts, you can call them, the leading people. I'm friends with them all, and I've lectured alongside them. And most will never come forward and say, I am an experiencer, because they believe it's bias. They might muddy the waters when it comes to their investigation and research because their belief might get in the way. I was like that myself until 5 years ago. And then 5 years ago, I said, you know what? I've turned right round. I don't do that anymore. Yes, I've had experiences. Yes, I still have experiences. I thought my experiences would run out when I'm a teen because people said, don't worry about it. It'll disappear when you're a teen because as you enter into adulthood and you start getting interested in work and girlfriends and things like that, you're not going to have those experiences. No, it carried right through and affects me now just as it was when my first experience was 7 years of age. I'm quite happy to say my experience now because I understand when witnesses come to me and say how they feel or explain something to me because I understand it because I've experienced some of it. And I think that's better knowledge as opposed from hiding behind the fact that I am an experiencer, but I'm not going to say. I did it for many years. I'm no shy to it now. But I know that there are many people that we would know, Jim, people at the top end, researchers that we see on TV or, conferences around the world, which are experiences which don't say.
You did address something here, though, and that is, can getting back to percentages about the fact that of all the people that you might deal with on this subject, maybe the majority of them are either shysters or greedy or in it for. But that doesn't mean that the phenomena isn't real. There's still a small percentage of, and you talking about Don and yourself, and it's like, yeah, no, that's what I go back to what Stanton Friedman said about you were talking about Project Blue Book. We'll come full circle here. They basically concluded that 5% of all the reports they got were truly unexplainable, and that's what Friedman always said, that 95% of all the UFO reports are bunk. They're either people who are sincerely mistaken, or else people liars and hoaxers, but the 5% is still so huge that it basically proves the phenomena, so
absolutely. I mean, what I find now is when people reach out to me regarding experiencing something, they've already done a tremendous amount of work for themselves to try and work out what it wasn't or what it was, before they even contact me. They've got all the data there, and I mean, I was good friends with Stanley for many years, and when we were together, we used to talk a lot about this, and I used to say that, yes, I totally agree the fact that there is the circus side of this phenomena, where it's entertainment, where people will provide hours of talks with no evidence whatsoever. At some point, I have to say, if I want to jump on the merry-go-round, I will never advance the subject, because you'll still be going on. We'll still be doing the same things we did 20, 30, 40, 50 years, if not more, beyond. We've got to push forward. We've got to make differences. And to do that, we've got to look at evidence. And I gravitate to evidence now. Specialized research that's been done with evidence. I mean, I do find stories interesting. I'm quite happy to listen to. I did it tonight. A lady rang me out the blue on my phone, an hour and 10 minutes. I don't know who this woman is, but she rang me for an hour and 10 minutes and just wanted to talk about her experiences that she had. And, she may very well have those experiences. I have no evidence of that, but she may do. And those people are out there, and they do have experiences, because I do. And if I did, other people can. But there is the showman. I go to many conferences around the world. I see a lot of the same faces. But there are those which is more for the entertainment industry. And it is a big, massive entertainment industry where people have done very well financially from certain things. But does it help us gain a better knowledge and understanding of this phenomena? I don't want to be in the same place. I've been at this for 41 years. Started with brown hair and I'm going grey now with it all. And I want to keep continuing as long as I do, because I think I've got that mindset is, what are we here for, Jim? We're not here to surely go to work 24/7 with our heads down, never looking up and never wondering.
Wow.
Surely we've got to try and work out about the mysterious and wonderful world we live in. At least that's something, we're trying to achieve here. And for me, it's a journey and trying to get answers, advancing the subject, moving forward, new ideas, we've had to create some of the equipment because we didn't have it. It wasn't manufactured. But now we've got wonderful technology that we're using. We're using time displacement meters and measuring, the effects of UAP in given locations over a period of time that leave gravity distortions and time displacements, latencies in that area for a certain length of time because of the disturbances there. There are new areas of research we can get into now, and that's exciting because, for many years it was just going round and round doing the same old things without getting the answers. So at least we're moving forward, small steps, but we are getting there slowly.
But I got to point out to people here, and because you might even take this for granted, so I don't even know if you can. You're talking about talking to this woman earlier. What you do is enormously time intensive. And I don't understand. Seriously, I don't know where you find the time to do it all. I don't. You spend an hour with her, you spend an hour with me, you're probably off reading some books, you're talking to Don or somebody, it's like going on. I learned something in life, Jim, a long time ago with having experiences, is that, compassion, care is free.
you can do that with anybody. You might not know these people from on the other side of the world, and they're quite happy to ring me and talk to me. And they end up talking to me after 20 minutes as if we've spoken and know each other forever. Telling me all sorts of different things. But, it's just because it's just the way I am. And I guess that, there's nobody in this subject that I don't get along with. Everybody gets along with me. I've got friends that don't get along with each other or won't share the same stage as each other, but I'm always welcome. And the fact is, to me, is that I'm friends with everybody and just try to move forward.
You didn't have to tell me that, because just by the volume of your work, it's obvious you get along with everybody. It's like you couldn't do it otherwise. You couldn't. No,
I don't have. No, it's not about my way is the best way. When people get too wrapped up into saying, well, I don't think that's right, and it doesn't matter. When I turn around to people and say, we need diversity in this subject, otherwise we might not find things. We've got to have diversity, because sometimes you might just hear something and go, do you know what? I never considered that. That's something I need to look into. Diversity is a good thing. I'm glad people have differences of opinions, because if we all had the same opinion, we could all be wrong.
Yeah. Steve, I'm going to let you go, because we're gonna have to come back, and you're going to have to tell me about you and Don in the house in Seattle another time. So
absolutely, yeah, Jim. Just keep in touch. Let me know when you want to. I'm quite happy to return. There's lots of things I could talk about. It's not a problem.
No, that's not a problem. Between the two of us, we're yackers. That's why I host the talk show, Steve. So anyway, you take care, all right? I really appreciate this. This is really illuminating. So your stuff, and that's glad to hear. So
well, thank you for having me on, Jim.
We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Take care.
Hi all, Jim Peters again for Conk News. Let me tell you one of the greatest things about Conk News. It's free. It's completely and totally free. You don't need to register. You don't need to log in, subscribe, none of that stuff. Sure, they run a few ads on the front page, but if you're an old fogey like me, you might actually appreciate this, because when you check out Conk News at conk.com, you'll probably notice that it's the closest thing to an old-fashioned hard copy newspaper that you'll find online. The latest up-to-the-minute news from 75 high-quality sources collected every 3 hours, all laid out with photos and headlines directly from the articles. And when you click on a story, you go directly to that story. No ad page, no interstitial page, none of that stuff. This is the way online news is meant to be. And did I mention that it's completely free? Seriously, how much of the stuff in America is free now, right? That's of quality anyway. So check this out for yourself. It's at conk.com, CONK.com. Conk News. Our thanks to Steve Mera for joining us from England. Connection's not bad, is it? That's the second interview we've done from England in the last 2 or 2.5 weeks, and it works out pretty well. The intertube works, doesn't it? Who would know? Who would think otherwise? I find it pretty amazing. I really found that talking to him fascinating. I really do. This guy knows so much, and he's done so many things. And like he was saying, and we have to get him on here again, because we never even got into the thing about him in the house in Seattle. I mean, that's when we started talking about, and an hour, 20 minutes later, he never actually did it. He's done some fascinating stuff, and like he said, he's actually a skeptic. He doesn't generally buy all the stuff right offhand, but he's seen enough to know that things are going on, and that's the way I am too. Same thing. The vast majority of stuff I see is crap, but I've seen enough to know that isn't crap, that something's going on. It's really amazing. And that's my story. I'm sticking to it. And that's our show for tonight. We're not going to take any calls tonight. We're going to take calls tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, I'm doing a solo show. So you call up. You never know who's going to call up. Might be my mom, my 100-year-old mother, maybe Santa, maybe JD Vance, or maybe that Cooper guy calls up, and maybe Think will call in too. Who knows? It's unfortunate since we got off. We used to have a lot of regular callers on Blog Talk Radio, but I don't think any of them ever really found us after that. Late great Blog Talk Radio, rest in peace. But any rate, yeah, you can call in too. You can. The number is 325, not now, tomorrow, 325-225-5546. 325 call Jim. And if you call that number at any time of the day or night when we're not on the air, we're not broadcasting live, you will you can leave a 2-minute message, and I would appreciate it if you did that, because if you're interested enough, I will play it on the air. So that's tomorrow night. Thursday night, Lee Richardson's back for a second weekly interview of 3 on our book Crisis Brains. And Friday, Sina McCullough, the medical correspondent for the Epoch Times, is going to join us. We have a lot of people on from the Epoch Times. If you've noticed, we kind of have it in there, and they kind of like us, and that's great because they're terrific people. These are really good reporters. I think she might be the 4th or 5th person we've had on from there, if I'm correct. Anyway, that's Friday. So that's our week here, and this is our night tonight. I want to thank Steve Mera again. I want to thank you for watching and listening. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it a lot. So I'll see you tomorrow night. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie, and good night to you wherever you are. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care, everybody.